Okay, we are up to the Mishnah on Daf Tzadi Amid Aleph. The Mishnah says like this: Kol midash of a mikdash, all dry measures in the Beis Hamikdash, hayu nidgashos, they were heaping, which means that, let's say, the isaron, it was not an isaron if you just did it level. You had to add a little bit to it, and then it was a proper isaron. Chutz mishal kayin gadol, except for the chavite kayin gadol, sheyagud shalatoicha, that was heaping. I'm sorry, sheyagud shalatoicha, that was level, meaning that the walls were high enough that it was the full measure if you filled it up without heaping. Now, the heaping, although most measures, the dry measures were heaping, midas halach, there is a difference between liquids and solids, and that's going to be a major discussion of today's daf. Midas halach regarding liquid measures, beirutzin kodesh. Beirutzin means not just what's heaping; it means the overflow. Whatever overflows, according to Rashi, it means overflow. That which overflows is kadosh. It's holy. As we'll see in a moment, the reason being is because the outside of the kalim are kadosh as well, at least by liquids, and therefore when the liquids overflow, they touch the outside and they're kadosh as well. Midas hayavesh regarding dry measures, beirutzin chol. That which overflows, according to Rashi, this is not the heaping part, this is above the heaping. That which overflows is chol. It's not kadosh. So if it were to fall, let's say, in a kli under it, it's not kadosh. Rav Akiva says, Rav Akiva takes it a step further. He says it's not a matter of the overflow. I'll tell you why. Midas halach kodesh, liquid measures, the kelim are kodesh, lefikach be'eretzeim kodesh. Therefore, the overflow is kodesh. Midas hayavish chol, lefikach be'eretzeim chol. According to Rav Akiva, as we'll see, the Gemara will explain, the entire kelim for solids were not niskadish at all with the Shemen HaMishcha. Okay, now the Gemara will explain more. Rav Yosi says, Loi mishum zeh. Rav Yosi says the reason why there's a difference between the overflow of liquids and solids is not whether the kalim are kadosh or not. It's very simple. Halach nekar vayavish in a nekar. According to Rav Yosi, it's very simple. When you pour and something overflows, what's overflowing is not necessarily what was just on top. Liquids, there's displacement, and therefore, at some moment, all of it was inside the kli. But when it comes to solids, it's not like that. It just overflows. It was never inside the kli. And therefore, according to Rav Yosi, the distinction between solids and liquids is not really a matter of whether it's a matter of, in science, the liquid, there's movement, and therefore what you're pouring on top is now at the bottom. What was on top and on the bottom. And that's not true by solids. Okay. You have three-way machlokes, but the Gemara will clarify in a moment what is this machlokes. Now, the Mishnah started off by saying that all kol midas, all dry measures were heaping. Now, if you remember yesterday, Shabbos, we had the last day of Yom Tov, not Shabbos, sorry. The last day of Yom Tov, we had a machlokes tanoim as to how many dry measures there were in the Beis Hamikdash. Either an isaron and a chatzi isaron, or according to a mayor, 2 isaron and a chatzi isaron. Now, the problem is, who is the author of our Mishnah that says that how many that says that all the dry measures were heaping money? Rav Meir, if you remember, Rav Meir had 2 isarons. One was heaping and one was solid. One was flat. So you can't say all of them are heaping. It's not true. Chad gadashu and Rabbanan, according to Rabbanan, none of them were heaping. Chadu machagave. There was only one type and it was leveled. Meaning, according to Rabbanan, there was no heaping at all. According to Rav Meir, there was one heaping, but there was also one level. So how could you say in the Mishnah that all of them are heaping? It's not true according to Rav Meir. So the Gemara is Amar Chizal Eilam Rav Meir. Really, it's Rav Meir. Umay kol midas. What does it mean? All measures, kol medidais, all measurements. Meaning that one kli. You're right. There were taka 2 kalim. One was heaping and one was level. The Mishnah doesn't mean all of them were heaping. It means all of the practical usage in the Beis Hamikdash were heaping. There were 2 kalim. One was used for the chavite kohen gadol. That was level. That was only used for one thing. The other kli was used for all the minchas. So it was used for all of them. It was used for all the measurements, and that was heaping. So when it says all of the kalim were heaping, it doesn't mean all the kalim. It means all the measurements in the Beis Hamikdash were used with the heaping kli. But there were other kalim that were level. Now, we have a 3-way machlekes in the Mishnah, and the Gemara will clarify what this machlekes is. So the Gemara says, Tanakama Savra, the Tanakama holds, Midas alach nimshacha bein b'finim b'chutz. Liquid kalim, the kalim for liquids, were nimshach with the Shemen HaMishcha inside and outside. Now, everything that was contact with the Shemen HaMishcha has the ability to anoint. Therefore, all the overflow is kadosh because the overflow doesn't just touch the inside; it doesn't touch the inside, it touches the outside. But the outside are kadosh. Midas yavish. But when it comes to dry measure kalim, nimshcha b'fnim v'loy nimshcha chutz. They were only anointed the inside, but not the outside. Therefore, the overflow is not kadosh. That's a Tanakama shita. Rabbi Akiva disagrees. He says no. Midas alach nimshcha b'mefrim b'chutz. I agree though. Midas alach is nimshach b'mefrim b'chutz. But Rabbi Akiva holds midas yavish loy nimshcha kol ikar. But Rabbi Akiva holds that the kalim for dry items were not nimshach at all. Not nimshach at all. Now, therefore the overflow is definitely not going to work. Now, the Mefarshim explained when Rabbi Akiva holds that it's not nimshach at all, it doesn't mean the items inside are not kaddish. The items inside are kaddish, but not because of the kalim, but because when you put it in the kli, you have the intention to be mekadesh what is inside. So it's like sort of like kedushas hapeh, but you're not going to mekadesh the overflow. So, but Rav Akiva basically, again, practically it's the same, but Rav Akiva's shita is that the kalim for dry were not nimshach at all. And Rav Yaisi says, Rav Yaisi says, I disagree with both of you. I think that the liquid and the solid kalim were both nimshach in the inside, not the outside. So if they're not nimshach on the outside, that's why the overflow is not kaddish by dry. So why is the overflow kaddish by liquids? I'll tell you why. That which is overflowing was at one point inside. The Gemara says, "Delach nekar megava demana kaosi v'hayavashena nekar." Okay, so that's why by liquids, if it overflows, that which is going in, then overflows out. So that's why it's kadosh. So says the Gemara, "V'chinekar mehava," but who cares that it touched it for a moment? But doesn't the person intend to only be mekadesh that which he needs? The overflow he definitely doesn't need. So you want to tell me that for a moment it touches the truth is this is a shayla on all the let's say the opinion that held that the outside is kadesh, the Tanakama. Why? But who cares? No one intends to be mekadesh that which is overflowing. So the Gemara gives two explanations. Amar of Idi of Dimi bar Shishna Meshmei Rav. Zois Emeres Klisharis Mekadesh Lebidas. You see from the sugya that the kalim are mekadesh whether you have das or not. You could only intend to be, to use a certain amount. If you put it in a kli, the kli is going to be kaddish. Ravina are at different teretz. The truth is, I could argue that the kli shares ataka not mekadesh shalom midas. So why are the overflows mekadesh? I'll tell you why. The truth is, on a biblical level, they're not kaddish. But Chazal made them kaddish because if people see, it'll be a bad optic for you to take something that was in a kli that overflowed and then you just take it home and just use it for personal use. It's going to be a bad optic. So the truth is, taka, it's not kaddish because the kalim are only mekadesh midas. But Chazal made it kaddish because Chazal were afraid that if they don't make it kaddish, then people are going to say, oh, Vaistachos kli sharis is not mekadesh at all. So it's more of an optic. So the Gemara has a kasha. The kasha is as follows. You're telling me that Chazal made a takana, that they're afraid to basically avoid confusion. Here's the question. Now the derech of the lechem aponim was, they put the lechem aponim on Shabbos. It lasted there for an entire Shabbos, and then the next Shabbos, they would take off the lechem aponim, they would take the 2 spoons of frankincense that have been sitting there for a week, burn it on the mizbech, and then you get to eat the bread. So it has to be on the shulchan for a week. Let's say instead of putting it on Shabbos, you put it on Sunday. So that coming Shabbos, it's only been on the shulchan for 6 days. Psula. It's no good because it's like mechusas man. It's not there long enough. So Ketzad Yasa, so what do? Let it sit there longer. So it'll sit there 13 days. It'll be there till the next Shabbos. Because it could stay longer than necessary. But here's the kasha of Amai. Why are we allowing such a thing? If you're worried about optics, there's a concept called lina, which means that if something goes past where it's supposed to be, it's a problem. So you're telling me that by the shulchan you can let it sit for 2 weeks, but why? Why aren't we concerned that if people say that one could be for 2 weeks, then the average carbon could be, sitting for a day or two? Meaning, why aren't you concerned that it's going to lead people to get confused and say, "Oh, Vaistachos," then there's no expiration date by karbanos? Why aren't you concerned about that? The truth is, b'chalal the shulchan it's sitting there for a week, but at least that's the time. Now you want it to sit for 2 weeks, so it's a week past the allotted time. So the Gemara says, "Panim achutz karamis." We're afraid about optics, but not by the shulchan. The shulchan is in the heichel. Panim lav kuli al miyadi, chutz kuli al miyadi. In the heichel, no one knows about it other than the kehanim. We're only going to worry about optics in the Azara, not in the Heichel, and that'll be the distinction between that. So the Gemara says, "Tanan Hasam Meiser Nesachim Leketzam Mizbech." Any excess Meiser Nesachim, we'll see what Meiser Nesachim is for a moment. They would sell it, whatever this is, they would sell, and they would use it for optional oilers to keep the mizbeach going. We don't want the mizbeach to sit idle by. They would take this excess and use it to buy optional oils. What is this excess that they would sell? The overflow of the midas, meaning that which overflowed. When people bring, let's say, flour and it overflows, or oil, whatever, wine that overflows, they would take that, they would compile it together, and they would sell it, and they would use that to buy an oil. That's the first mahalach. Rav Yochanan says, no, the overflow is as follows. Sometimes, I'll explain, the Beis Hamikdash would buy flour, right? They had partners that they would buy flour for. Now, oftentimes, they would make a deal. Let's say they would buy $1 a pound, okay? But by the time that it's ready to be delivered, the price has changed. Now, the price can change to hurt the Beis Hamikdash or to help the Beis Hamikdash. Meaning, it could be when they made the deal, it was £1 for $1, and now a pound will only get you. Now, $1 will only get you half a pound because the price of flour went up. So really, the Beis Hamikdash should get hurt. The halacha is they have to honor the deal and give the pound of flour for $1. Now that's where it's helping the Beis Hamikdash. What if that's where the Beis Hamikdash would have gotten hurt, but Chazal overrode it? What about the opposite? What if the price of flour plummets and now $1 will get you 2 pounds? So the halacha is you have to give them 2 pounds. Whatever the Beis Hamikdash never gets the bad deal. They always get the best deal. Now often that'll create an excess, a surplus. So that surplus will then be used. That's the Meiser Nesachim that would be used to buy extra oilers. The Gemara says, it's a reference to the following Mishnah. If, let's say, they made a deal that they would supply flour for the Beis Hamikdash at 4 sa a sela, and the price of flour rose that you only get 3 sa for a sela, the halach is yisapik ma'arba, they still have to supply that original amount. Go to the next page. Mishalosh. But the opposite, mishalosh, but if, let's say, it was supposed to be 3 sa sela, v'omdu be'arba, and the price of flour fell, and now you can get 4 sa for a sela, so then they get the surplus, that they get the extra. Shiad hegdash al yoina. So the point is that that's the excess that they would get. They would often get more flour, and that excess flour, that's the halacha that they would use for kaitz hamizbeach. So you have 2 different mahalachim. It's either the overflow or it's the excess in the deal. Tani kavasar chiva rabba, tani kavasar v'yechem. We have a brisa following both. Tani kavasar chiva rabba. Berutzi midas halalu, this excess flour, overflow, oil, whatever it is, mayu oisim behen. What would they do with it? If there's another carbon, use it for another carbon. But if there is no other carbon, then they'll become disqualified overnight. Meaning, but if, let's say, it's not overnight yet, then makitzin behenazam mizbech, they would use it for the extra carbonas. Yeah, because you can't. So if there was excess, I said before that they would sell it. The truth is they don't have to sell it. They would just gather it together, and then when there's an extra carbon, they would bring that with the carbon. The kayed zemahu, and what type of carbon was this? Oilus. Habasal Hashem v'aris l'kehanim. That was the optional oilus. Yeah, so the point is, so if there was excess, and it was before the night, they would either use it or sell it, and then buy extra carbonas. That's the first mahalach. That's the brisa, like Rav Chia bar Abba, and Tani Kavas Rav Yochanan, that the Meiser Nesachim is a reference to the surplus that Beis Hamikdash will get by the business deal. Hamekabel v'sabik salasas ba'arba v'amdu b'shalish, v'sab ba'arba b'shalish v'am ba'arba v'sab ba'arba shiyad hekdash al yoyna v'zo sheshaninu Meiser Nesachim l'kayitz l'mizbeach. Okay, mamash good. Okay. No Mishnah. Kol karbanos hatzibor v'hayachid. All communal and private karbanos require nesachim. They require wine libations and minchas. Wine and oil and flour. Chutz, except min habachar, v'hamaiser, v'hapesach, v'chatas, v'asham. All of these do not require nesachim. Ella shechata shel mitzayra v'asham aitar nesachim. Except there is a chatas of the mitzayra and the asham of the mitzayra that require nesachim. Okay, but generally requires nesachim except for these karbanos. Now, Tan Rabbanon, what the Gemara is going to do until the end of the daf is just going to be drushes to prove this. Now it says regarding the nesachim, I'll read you the pasuk. The pasuk is V'asisim ishet laHashem. If you bring a carbon ola uzevach lefali neder, an ola or a neder or nedava, oy ma'yadechem, or on your yamtiv, la'asais reichin Hashem and abakar min atzayin. but then you bring nesachim. So vasisim isha l'Hashem, if you bring a carbon l'Hashem, yachol kol oil liyishim yehiton nesachim. You might think any carbon requires nesachim, afilu mincha, even a mincha. Maybe if I optionally donate a mincha, it should also have wine with it. Talmud loymar oila, it has to be like an oila. Now, shlom minayin, how do I know that applies to shlom as well? Talmud loymar zevach. Toida minayin, how do I know toida also requires nesachim? Talmud loymar oy zevach. Yachol shani marba af bechar u'maisur pesach v'chatas v'asham. Maybe I should include these karbanos, that they should also acquire libations. Talmud loymar lefalei neder oy nedava. The pasuk says that only karbanos that are like a neder or nedava, ba b'neder nedava tanasachim, she'ena bar nedava en tzachasachim. Only a carbon that's optional, as opposed to the pesach, which is not optional, bechar, maiser, chatas, and asham, because they're not optional, they do not require libations. Mashma lahoitzias elu, oitzias chayves habos machem saregel beregel. Now, the Gemara says that once you're excluding obligatory karbanos, I should also exclude the obligatory karbanos that are brought on Yom Tiv. Right? When you go to the Beis Hamikdash, you have to bring shlamim and oilas riyah and shalmi chagiga. Because they're obligatory, they should also oilas riyah v'shalmi chagiga, that they should also be excluded. That includes them. Kol haba mayadechem ta nesachim. Anything that's on the Yom Tiv requires nesachim. Mashma lahavias elu. Avi so'ir chatas hoylu bon chayve beregel. So says the Gemara, then I should also include the so'ir chatas because it's also brought as on Yom Tiv. Tam lemer b'chisasa ben bakar. The pasuk then says you only have to bring libations for a young bull. Ben bakar b'chlal haya v'lamayatz l'hakishalach. It was included, and why is it specified? To tell you ma ben bakar miyuchad ba ben nedava af kol ba ben eder nedava. And this excludes a chatas which can never be brought, meaning it has to be the type of carbon that can be brought as a neder nedava, excluding a chatas that is never brought as a neder nedava. So therefore, the chatas that is brought as the musaf of a Yom Tiv, although it's on Yom Tiv, but because it's a chatas, it's excluded. The Brayso then continues. Lasis reich nichayich la'Hashem min habakar min natzayin. Not tamaloymar lefishin emar oila. The pasuk says you have to bring a libation for an oila. Shemeni afilu oila sa'oif. Maybe an oila sa'oif also requires the nesachim of wine or nesachim of oil. Tamaloymar min habakar oy min natzayin. So min habakar oy min natzayin tells you that only these type of animals divrei Rav Yoshia. Rav Yonasan oimer. Rav Yonasan says and it's sarich. You don't need it. Hareu oimer zevach. Va'oifen is zevach. The pasuk already says zevach, and a bird is not a zevach. Im kein matam loimer min habakar oy min hatzayin. So if that's the case, then why does the pasuk say min habakar oy min hatzayin? If I already know to exclude birds, then why does the pasuk say cattle or flock? Lefish and emar adam ki yakrav mikem karban laHashem min habehima min habakar u min hatzayin. The pasuk says regarding a nedava. It says min habakar min hatzayin. Yachla oimer harei alai oila yavi mishem. You might think it has to be min habakar min hatzayin is both. It's not or, it's and. Tam lemer min habakar oy min hatzayin. Ratza echa maybe, ratza shnei maybe. This pasuk tells you that it's not and, it's or. That when you donate an oila, you don't have to bring a bakar and hatzayin, it's or. Rav Yonasan, so here's the kasha. Rav Yonasan is saying that this pasuk is telling me that it's or and not and. The problem is that there's a machloikes throughout Shas between Rav Yonasan and Rav Yoshia. Is when the pasuk describes two things, is it and or? Rav Yonasan shita is ha'omer ad sheyifrelcha hakasav yachtav, that it's always or until you're told otherwise. This is regarding a cursing a parent. It says es aviv ve'es imai, and Rav Yonasan shita is that it's always or until you're told otherwise, unless it says yachtav. And therefore, I know that it's or. You don't have to curse both parents. Either parent will get you the death penalty. So here's the shaila. So according to Rav Yonasan, it's always or. So why do I need the pasuk to say oy min habakar oy min hatzayin? It's always or. So the Gemara says itzrich sal kadei techamina. You might think that the umin is commandach sev yachdadami. It's as if it's written beforish. Therefore, oy tells you no. Meaning, you might think this is the exception. Normally, it's or, but over here it says umin. So you might think that in this case is the exception. Kamash one, it's not the exception. Now, Rav Yosha damer afal gav the loik sev yachdav commandach sev yachdadami. Rav Yosha whose shita is that in the Torah it's always and until you're told otherwise. So then taka libay kra. How do you know that when you donate oil you don't have to bring both? And he used the pasuk for something else. So how does he know that when you donate an oil, you don't have to bring both? So the answer is haksiv im oila karbanoi min habakar, the im min hatzayin karbanoi. These two psukim indicate that they're two separate. The fact that the Torah gives different scenarios implies that An oila does not have to be both. V'idach and Rav Yonasan itzrich. Sal kedei dechamina hani mila b'mefarish aval b'stama laisi mitravayu kamash malon. Rav Yonasan says the reason why I need two psukim to exclude this is because I might think that the only time where the Torah separates them is where you specifically said I'm only bringing one. But if you just say I'm bringing an oila, you might think you have to bring both. Kamash malon, it's or and not and. I will stop here.